All right, all right, all right. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for still being there. Thank you for the whole thing. Let me bring up to stage my two new friends, Peter Monkhouse and Jenna Landers. All right. So let me introduce them a little bit for you. So Deanna Landers is the founder and president of Project Managers Without Borders, which has the mission to make a positive difference in the world through collaborative and sustainable projects. Diana currently serves on the board of directors for Project Managers Without Borders and previously served on the boards of director of IEEE Smart Village, Metro Denver PM Education Foundation, PMI Mile I chapter, and for 6 years on the international board of directors of PMI, leading the board as chair in 2013. Wow. And she was previously the director of program management at Charter Communications, responsible for improving the maturity and effectiveness of project, program, and portfolio management for the organization. Prior to working for Charter, she was with IBM for 11 years, contributing to their award winning Project Management Center of Excellence, as well as delivering a $350 million portfolio of projects. Thank you for being there.
My
And
pleasure.
now, yes, thank you. So now let me introduce you Peter Monkhouse, who is the founder of New Gen P, a training and consulting company. Peter teaches project management courses at University of Toronto, Toronto Metropolitan University, and Procep Associates. Peter is also on the board of directors and an active for project managers without borders. As a product owner and entrepreneur, Peter has actively led projects and project managers in the areas of education, consulting, engineering, information technology, health, and organizational change for multinational organization. Wow, I'm sorry. While reading your bio, this is really, really outstanding. I feel so small having you on stage with me. All right. So but the mic is yours, and I'm really interested into listening to your awesome presentation. I will bring it up for you, and the floor is yours. Thank you very much for being there.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And Peter and I are grateful to be involved with this event and this group of presenters. I also feel personally grateful to be part of the project management profession. It's unique in that it requires skills that are needed everywhere. Anything that's done in the world is done through projects. So, anytime there's a strategic initiative being implemented, anywhere there's a disaster recovery or humanitarian effort, whenever there's any innovation being brought to fruition, it's through projects. So, we in the project management profession focus a lot of time on our careers, the jobs that we're paid to do, and those jobs are really important. They make the world go round. Most of us aren't working in the social sector, but we can offer our project management services on a volunteer basis and feel that satisfaction of contributing to humanitarian and social needs. There are so many needs in the world where project management skills can be applied to make a meaningful difference, to improve the good organizations are already doing, and then also to directly impact those in need. So, when you think about how we can help, there are lots of options that come to mind. Money. That's the first thing that comes to mind when some kind of a disaster, anything happens, people are asking for money. So we can help with that. We can donate our things. We can provide lodging and that sort of thing. We're on to the next slide. Um, we can provide lodging for refugees and labor, those sorts of things. and expertise. And so for all those contributions, they're all fantastic. They're wonderful. But I'd like to suggest that you contribute at a higher level. Anyone can ladle soup, but not everyone can coordinate the ladling of soup across multiple locations, for example. So the point here is with our project management skills, we can make much more of an impact. So we're going to talk about effective humanitarian work. There are 40,000 international NGOs and about 10 million worldwide, if you count those that focus within just one country. All of them are trying to improve the human condition. So there are people in these organizations who are passionate about what they do. They're doctors, they're engineers, food service providers, whatever it is. And they're good at what they do and they're passionate, but they don't necessarily know anything about how to run a project. They run projects. They have projects. Every other organization has projects, but they might not be managed well. They might not be efficient or effective or fulfilling the needs of the teams involved. And that's where project management comes in. There's such a need for efficiency and effectiveness in the social sector. It's ripe for an application of project management to improve results. So I'm going to tell a story about a project that we had, which was with a hospital that was in Denver. They were planning on taking down one hospital, well, first building the new hospital and taking down the other one. And they weren't going to move the equipment. They bought all new equipment. But what they wanted to do was take that equipment to their sister clinic in Tanzania and donate all of that equipment and the time of some doctors. And we ended up getting involved with them. We had a meeting with them. In the beginning, our very first meeting, I introduced myself and said, here's who I am, here's what project management is, and here's how it can help you with efficiency and effectiveness. And every person around the table introduced themselves. And in the end, after their introduction said, and we need you. We need that stuff you're talking about. We need to know what's happening. We need it to be more efficient. We need it to be more effective. So what we did for this organization was one of the key things that we did was just help them with a schedule, a very minor thing. We didn't run the whole project. They had their way of doing things in their mission, for their missions. And so we helped them with a schedule and a risk plan. And the risk plan was the most interesting to me because they had all sorts of risks that they already knew about, such as they will lose power. They will lose power multiple times a day. So the IT team had nothing to do while the power was out. And the doctors had nothing to do when they couldn't find the key to the operating room, which happened a lot as well. And so what we did is we created the plan to help them help each other when they had their downtime to be much more effective and efficient.
Peter. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you, Deanna. And please, like Deanna said, I'm pleased to be here as well and to join this group to talk about project management and to help support the Turkey and Syrian victims of the earthquake. You know, as we talk about projects, right, we know that, you know, valuable results that deliver value to customers and deliver benefits to organizations are sustainable. But, you know, it's interesting to think about sustainability in a more broader sense. Now, as a project manager practitioner, as Deanna mentioned, we have skills that can help any organization. For-profit, not-for-profit, NGOs, we can certainly know we can help them and can help them be successful, help them deliver their strategy, help them move forward on their mission. But when we want it to be sustainable, there are really, you know, 5 different ways we can think about this. And we're going to talk about a couple of them during the short time we have with you. So the first one is maybe the easiest, is as a project manager, we may be leading a project in our organization around sustainability, some sort of sustainability initiative we may have in our organization. Now, let me talk a little bit more about this one. So on the graphic here we have is that sustainability is often referred to as the triple bottom line of planet, people, and profit. Okay? There may be other words you may hear instead of planet, maybe environmental, instead of profit, it may be productivity or something along that line. But that's basically what it is, triple bottom line. And this idea of the triple bottom line is that they will have to balance off, right? If you make a lot of profit, you may be hurting the environment or hurting the people. So there's a trade-off here between these three. Doesn't that sound familiar? Right? As project managers, we talk about the triple constraint, about the iron triangle, about balancing and running projects under constraints of being on time, on budget, on scope, right? And we expanded to other ones now on quality, but it's still this idea of managing under constraints. So that fundamental training that we have to manage on strengths can help organizations understand how they can balance their triple bottom line of sustainable development in order to move forward. Okay, so that's one aspect where we can help out. The second is to think about how do we make the benefits of our product or project that we produce, the product, sustainable. So how do we make sure that those benefits stay for the long term? They're just not there for a year or a few months, but they continue on. So think about how to do that. Third is how do we manage our project in a sustainable way? How do we make sure we're doing some of the lean practices, eliminating waste, right? Trying to be as efficient as possible and doing our actual delivery of the product or service. We'll come back and talk about that in a little bit. Next is how do we manage the team, right, in a sustainable way? And this is really focuses on the people aspect. How do we make sure that the team is not burnt out, that there's an appropriate work-life balance? In projects, we're traditionally moving from one crisis to another, trying to push our team to meet deadlines. But how do we balance that out? That's another aspect of sustainability we need to consider. And the last one, right, which we'll talk about today as well, is how do we make ourselves sustainable? As project managers, how do we not get burnt out, right? And how do we grow in our profession and in our ability to lead teams? So let's talk a little bit about promoting project sustainability. So the idea of delivering a project and making it sustainable. And we see here we have some questions that we should think about asking as we embark upon any project. Well, the first thing is we start with the end in mind. I mean, what's the goal of the project? What are we trying to achieve? What's the benefits the organization needs from this project? What value are we delivering to the customer? So we need to think about that and start off with that and understand what that is. I talk a lot about the idea of making sure our project is linked to strategy. Second is when we start collecting requirements, think about sustainability. Think about what are requirements that maybe our stakeholders aren't thinking about, and we have to ask them for to make sure that the product or our project is sustainable and to sustain the benefits. Third, identify the benefits, right? What are the benefits we're trying to achieve, in particular around sustainability, right? Around how we're trying to make a project that will address the triple bottom line. Next, focus on the long-term impact, right? It's not just about, often as a project, we deliver that product, but think about what is that product trying to do? What's the product life cycle? Are we making sure that product that we deliver can be further enhanced to meet customer needs? How are we going to deal with the end of life of that product? So think about the long-term impact of the product that we're creating with our project. Next is pay attention to the stakeholders, right? So help identify all the possible stakeholders that we have, everyone that's impacted by the project and who can impact the project, and think about extending them to understand what their interests are and making sure we take them into account. And lastly, as we think about metrics, think about, can we include any metrics around sustainability in our projects? Okay, so these are some things for a project to think about. And to further illustrate this, Deanna, can you share us an example from Puerto Rico?
Absolutely. So we partnered with Rotary International with the simple idea of addressing community water needs better. They had a bad experience with their well drilling solution being expensive and not sustainable by the community in Madagascar. And they asked us to help them with their next opportunity. And we found several communities in Puerto Rico. Their infrastructure was not perfect to start with, but then they were hit by a couple of strong hurricanes in a row. So what we identified is that we would, with Rotary, that we would focus on filters instead of wells or anything else that wasn't sustainable, filters that could be built by the community, and so that when Rotary and Project Managers Without Borders were gone, they could continue, the community could continue making these filters. After the hurricanes, they were drinking water that was coming off their roofs, and they were capturing the water in buckets. And obviously that's not very clean. So the filters were to address that concern. It took a very long time for the infrastructure to be improved, and it's still not that great. And that was a few years ago. So what ended up happening is, with our project management skills, our team got together. We had an expert in research who helped identify some potential solutions. We ended up doing a proof of concept using our project management experience, that we really should be trying it out and not, and iterating versus just doing this. Let's just put this whole thing in and see if it works. So the very first opportunity they had was to make a filter that was, the first picture that you can see is made out of concrete. They made a couple of them. The people of Puerto Rico, of Mocha, the community we're helping in Puerto Rico, could access the materials locally, but it had some issues, like they couldn't move them. They wanted to share with their friends. They didn't want to move the water. They wanted to move the filters and things like that. And so we went back to the drawing board, did another iteration, and ended up with a filter made out of buckets. Just buckets you can get at the hardware store, and a few other things that you could get there. We ended up with 10 on their first trip. We made 100 of them, and it wasn't us. It wasn't the Rotary, but it was the community making the filters out of the buckets. The instructions were in English and Spanish so that everybody could understand. And from the beginning, the team considered how the islanders would be able to create these water filters on their own, using materials that they could easily get. So it's entirely sustainable. At this point, they've got 1,000 of these filters in use.
Excellent. Thank you, Deanna. Now let's move on and talk about metrics, just as you mentioned with the Puerto Rico example of having 1,000 filters in use. Now, as project managers, we're used to having metrics. We always want to know and be able to communicate to our stakeholders and our sponsors. Are we on budget? Are we on time? How are we doing? But we should also apply that same rigor to think about, how do we have metrics to measure the impact of the project, the impact of the product on the organization, on our people using the product of our project, and a combination of this. So we need to think about this, of the importance of having these metrics to show what value we're delivering, what benefits we're delivering. Now, not only is that good for the sponsor to know, and the stakeholder and some of the key stakeholders, but it's also going to be necessary for the volunteers to understand what value they're delivering, and seeing and hearing and being able to see the impact they have, right? So I've got 100 filters in the Puerto Rico, so I've helped 100 families. I have 200 filters. I now help 200 families get fresh, palatable drinking water. It's important. But it can also be important, if we're in the non-for-profit world, to help share with donors, to be able to share what the impact they have is. We're very generously donating to CARE here to help out with the earthquake victims, right? CARE is going to be, we trust that CARE will use that money to help the victims. Wouldn't it be nice for them to share metrics about how many people they helped, how they've made a difference to those people's lives? So we need to think about this idea of metrics so that we can communicate and show the value of what we're doing. But communication, that's the second part. It's one thing to have metrics, but we also have to think about communications. Now, we know as project managers, communication is one of the keys for making sure projects are successful, is to have good communications. But it's also the key when we're working on projects that around sustainability, around disaster recovery, to be able to communicate the metrics of how we're doing and publicize it as broadly as we can. Not doing it once, to do it frequently so that people will understand and see the progress that's being made. It's also important that we start having milestones so we can celebrate and people can understand we've made a significant achievement so that they can feel comfortable and feel rewarded that they see the good value that's being delivered to us. And use all the tools we have available, whether it be social media, whether it be just talking to people, whether it be sharing with our friends, whatever we can do. It's so important to do this. And in addition, to make sure that as part of the project that we have a plan to have an impact report that can be produced at the end to show what the impact of the project is. This helps retain volunteers, keep volunteers, and keep all the stakeholders aware and happy of what we want to do. So the last thing we should be making sure we communicate is what the next steps are. This is part of sustainability. We don't want to be there forever. We want to be able to share what the next steps so the people who we have worked with can continue on, just as we talked about in the Puerto Rico project. But we have another example for Deanna to share to talk about the importance of communications.
Right. So we had a project in Accra, Ghana. The situation there was that, so Accra is in every year, or at least very frequently, they would have a flood in Ghana. And sometimes these floods could be fatal. There, you can see in one of the photos, there are all sorts of people looking around at things that had fallen into the water, and definitely a bad situation. But they knew that they know that they're coming. It's something that is frequent and predictable. And so you'd think, well, how can we help if they haven't resolved it up until this point? One of the things that we did is we had various teams involved, mainly actually PMI chapters and people from those chapters from Belgium, the UK, Luxembourg, Greece, and of course, Ghana, other chapters as well. But we had workshops in those different places to figure out what the situation was, what the challenges were, and why there hasn't been a lot of advancement to solve the problem. One of the key findings in this was that there were lots and lots of stakeholders, and they didn't know about each other. They didn't know. Everybody knows that there was government involvement, but who, which part of the government, which organization? Was it the local government? Was it the national government? So lots of levels of government, research organizations, other organizations were working on the problem, but their efforts weren't coordinated, and they weren't supporting each other's efforts either. We identified, and with their help, we got these stakeholders together, and together we're able to identify specific issues like storm drainage management, waste collection disposal, lack of institution coordination, I already mentioned. The main thing, I think, was the collaboration between stakeholders, the vision of joint success, where the key areas are identified and it's part of an action plan, was critical. They created a communication plan to include all the stakeholders, and everybody was on the same page then. So they also, what we ended up doing as a team, created a master action plan involving all the stakeholders that they had buy-in to, that had the individual tasks involved. So one other thing that we learned from this is the expert advice from international and renowned project managers and engineers on their issue, paying attention to what was happening in Ghana, was seen as important, and they really needed to make a change because this was brought to their attention by people outside their own community and experts, which is really interesting, and it made a big difference to the people there.
So the last part we'll talk about is the personal growth and sustainability. So looking at you as a project manager. Now, Deanna and I have had years, I hate to say this, of working with volunteers at PMI. And, volunteers are great. We love volunteers. They bring their passion, their enthusiasm. And that's what's one of the great things about volunteers. But as leaders of volunteers, we also have to recognize that volunteers are just that they have other things in their life. So as you think about volunteering and volunteering to help out organizations as a project manager, there's 5 things we just like to ask you to consider. First is commit in doses, right? Think about what is reasonable for you to do. I don't mind having a volunteer coming to me and say, Peter, I can only volunteer a couple of hours a month, right? I can work with that, right? But I don't want volunteers come and say to me, oh, I can volunteer to do this and not have the time to do it. So think about what you can do. If you have a slow period, volunteer. Say you're volunteering just for this next week or so when you have a slow period. But after that, you're going to be busy again. Second, right? Keep things simple, right? Question the complexity. Danielle talked about that in the session before us about this. So keep things simple. When you design, when you think about processes, just keep it really, really simple. We're not building a very complex system in most of the cases. We're just trying to get a job done, right? So just keep things simple. As we talked about in Puerto Rico, right? The team was designing things that were available in the local hardware store. Maybe it wasn't going to be the perfect water filtration plant or system, but it was simple. The local people in Puerto Rico could do it. So always keep things simple. Okay? We recognize your life has ebbs and flows, so you have different levels of busyness. So make sure that when you volunteer, you communicate that. Wait on a great idea. Volunteer work has its rewards, but the most reward that we get when we volunteer is because it's for something passionate about. So don't just take the first opportunity that presents itself. Wait for the great idea. Wait for the idea that you're truly passionate about, that it will excite you. Because I think was one of the earlier presenters talked about, I think it was Liz, talked about this idea of, well, I could watch a sitcom or I could do my volunteer work. Well, you're going to watch the sitcom if the volunteer work doesn't really something you're passionate about. So wait for that great idea. And last thing is make sure you avoid burnout. Don't overcommit yourself. It's going to impact not only your volunteer work, but it will impact the other parts of your life. Right? So only commit to what's reasonable. But doing so, the advantages of volunteering for you personally can be extraordinary. And certainly I know I've recognized it from my own life, what I've joined from volunteering. But Deanna has a great story about one of our volunteers who has really had almost a life-changing experience from the work they did.
So Freddie waited for the right project for him that had personal significance. He was born in Ecuador, and although he lived in the United States, he was involved with Project Managers Without Borders, heard about the Ecuadorian project that we had, and got involved. What we were doing was we were partnering with Engineers Without Borders. We were helping them create irrigation for a community that was in the Andes. So the rain falls at the top of the mountains, and so that community gets rain. The communities at the bottom of the mountains has a stream where the rain ends up, so they have water. But this community in the middle had some difficulty getting the water to their crops. And so irrigation, it was the answer, and Engineers Without Borders was our partner in helping them out. So Freddie was actually able to go. We don't always travel, especially with COVID, but he was able to actually go to Ecuador and meet with people. He grew up there, but in the city. And these people were rural and a really different community from what he was used to. And so the growth, the personal growth that he had in this experience was just tremendous. He really did. He can't stop thanking us enough. And it was him that did really the work. It was fantastic to have such a great connection between a volunteer and a project. He was able to establish relationships that made the difference in the project between the Engineers Without Borders and the community. And so he was trusted by both teams. It just worked tremendously well. And his project management skills were not that great in the beginning, and he learned from the other people on the projects. And so it was a fantastic opportunity for him in so many different ways. And the last that he identified was actually just contributing. contributing to his country and the people that he met and was able to have a great relationship with during the project. So I want to talk about opportunities to contribute. There are many ways to find opportunities to contribute your project management skills. And the first might be to look at your employer. A lot of employers have programs where they'll either pay an organization that you're volunteering for. They'll actually make a donation to an organization that you volunteer for, or they might even give you time off to volunteer for an organization. So that's the first thing. There are many, many others. So the PMI Education Foundation, we already heard about Hours for Impact, the little blip, the little video earlier, just before we went on, talked about Hours for Impact. That program is a fantastic program to track your volunteer hours and really show how much of a difference we're making as a community. They also have a couple of projects that we had created or that we had done that were highlighted through their program online. PMI chapters, many chapters have a day of service or other opportunities to volunteer for your project management skills. If you are involved in another profession, you're an engineer or you're part of Rotary, some other sort of professional association, often they have projects that need project managers. Then there are the ones that are not as obvious. So your local church or boys club, girls club, a different religious organization, a school. Those, they don't necessarily see them as projects, but they've got projects. And so one of the things that you can do is either do it yourself. It's the bubble up there. Do it yourself. Come up with an idea that you can do to help, a project that they can do that you can manage, or just a few tools and techniques that can support them in making their contributions even greater. Hospitals, obviously, relief efforts is what we're talking about here. There are lots of NGOs and not-for-profit organizations that may align with your passions. So we talked earlier about the Sustainable Development Goals. You saw it in the video that came before. Maybe you can get some inspiration from those. If there's not a particular cause that you're interested in, lots of ideas can come from that. So, and then the last I would say is volunteer matching organizations, volunteer.org or Project Managers Without Borders. We obviously have lots of relationships, lots of projects, and can use a lot of skills in the projects that we're involved with. So just to make the last point, in addition to offering project management skills to support organizations that are already in place, you can lead your own support your own project for a cause, like a fundraiser or drive for resources or a rally or something like that. So many organizations don't tend to invest in their project management, and they might not even recognize that project management can help or how much it can help them achieve their missions and make an impact. So lastly, I would say PMI has a Times of Need site online that is a great hub of information that you might be able to find some information there on how you can contribute and volunteer. So what I'd like to do is just point out that we need to be the change that we want to see in the world. A quote from Mahatma Gandhi, my very favorite: share your skills with those who need it most. Whether that means facilitating meetings for an engineering nonprofit, or coordinating a schedule for a medical mission, or organizing a Cub Scout camping trip, or avoiding future disasters. Your skills can improve the efficiency and effectiveness of all those efforts and improve the impact that they have. It starts with you and a recognition that you have the knowledge and the skills that can make a significant difference in the lives of others. So we encourage you to apply your project management knowledge and skills to make a difference, to improve the good that organizations are already doing, and directly impact those in need. Thank you for attending and helping us make the world a better place through project management.
Wow. Wow. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It was such a great presentation. I love it.
Thank you.
Yes, so thank you so much. So we have time for a couple of questions. We have a great question here that I would like to point out. Maybe just me remove that, and maybe let's add this. Yoo-hoo.
Oh,
Okay,
yes, we have to add that. Yes,
yes,
absolutely.
that's the whole goal.
Look at
Exactly.
my screen. It's right here. Everybody look at that.
Exactly. Exactly. So let me show the question. So it's from Lionel. Deanna, can you explain us why you started Project Management Managers Without Borders?
Yes, I was part of PMI's board of directors and traveling around the world and sharing information about how incredible project management skills are and how you need them for every project in the world, for any innovation, the kinds of things I talked about earlier. And I would run into people after the presentations who talked about how awesome that is, and they agree, but they really wanted to help others from a humanitarian perspective. And I realized that, and I had been that way as well. I had been donating time all over the place, volunteering, but it really clicked talking to all those other people who I knew were interested in making such a difference with these unique skills that we have. So that's where it came from.
If I can just add, I had a similar experience when I was on the PMI board. I got to speak at the Manaus chapter in northern Brazil. Wonderful experience. Hi to my friends in Manaus. And when I was at the reception, I had two women came up to me and asked, how can I use my project management skills to save the rainforest? And I did not have a good answer for them. And that's why I wanted to help out Deanna with Project Managers Without Borders.
Wow, I love it. And you pointed out, Deanna, at the end of your presentation, and what I have in mind is everybody wants to change people and having them to adopt another change, but the only real control that you have is with your own person to get involved, to do something with your skills. I love it. All right. There's another question from Elizabeth Ector. So, Diana, how does Project Managers Without Border measure the overall impact of its portfolio of programs? And maybe how you allocate your time and energy because you have so much.
A lot of time, a lot of energy. So we actually have impact reports at the end of our projects. So they're all different. All the projects are different. So the one that we talked about before was the filters in Puerto Rico. So one of the things that we did there is we identified, well, this is a community of 3,400 people. And our goal is to provide clean water for every single person in that community. So we measured our success by that. Our impact, we took full credit for the impact, the entire impact. In this particular case, it's not the case in all of them. But the reason that we did was because we had somebody who actually researched the solution. So we put the people with the money with the people with the need together and managed it. So that's a huge impact, right? And then, well, that's just one example. And as I said, there are many others, and you have to do them on a case-by-case basis. The other part of the question was, how do we manage our time? Personally, we have to do what is the most interesting to us. And so we actually, I have been finding opportunities to get our people involved. We've been creating communities so that we could have something special in Latin America because they wanted something special, and I don't speak Spanish well enough. And so it's just like, I can't remember who exactly one of the presenters earlier was saying, but let the people do what they're really good at. I'm not doing everything. And so I'm focusing on what I'm good at. Peter's focusing on what he's good at and has a passion for. And that's what we're doing, is we're making sure that we spend our time wisely so that we don't get burned out.
And I would also say that we also focus, right, Deanna? I mean, we looked at the 17 development goals. We decided we'd start working on water and climate change to try to stay focused so that we don't get, unsuccessful because we're just spread too thin. So keep ourselves focused, exactly, which is another thing to do. And I think that was another, I think, Liz, you mentioned that earlier on when you talked about your talk about philanthropy, but keeping focused on things that you're passionate about.
Exactly. So we're really good. We know a lot about water management now, right? Not just because of the Water Week. We've done a lot of water management projects and we're good at it now. And the one that we recently added to our portfolio is the climate action SDG. And so now we're getting better at, the terminology and what it takes and what we need to do to help and who we can help as well.
Wow. Thank you so much. It was so inspiring to have you today with us. Once again, I'm amazed by everything that you do. It's really inspiring and making the world a better place. Wow.
Through project management.
Through project management, yes.
Go team. Together we can.
Boom. I love it.
Thank you. Merci tout le monde.
Thank you.
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup. So it was the time we had today. So thank you very much. And once again, for everyone listening, we will be running on a short break and of course continuing a little bit after in 10 minutes with Olivier Lazare, which just accepted to replace one of our speakers that is really feeling sick today. So yes, thanks again, Olivier, for that. So see you in 10 minutes.